I'd rather to speak really like, you have the driven seat. Like you may raise any topic you wish, but mainly I'll focus about such certain topics. Mainly about our foreign policy of Kuwait, how it shaped our independence, how we struggle, security challenges of Kuwait back to 1961, maybe about democracy in Kuwait, we can go at that area. Soft diplomacy of Kuwait, maybe we can tackle the Kuwaiti fund, the policy of the Kuwaiti fund. Other areas in the GCC, obstacles of the GCC crisis, mainly like, we do have the Qatari, Saudis, UAE crisis maybe. Efforts of Kuwait in mediation, which area maybe like, maybe we'll go to Ukraine, we'll see the war, and what is the influence of the energy, really, maybe we can tackle the issue of OPEC plus, maybe, if you have questions in that area. I'm very flexible, really, but let us start about the story of Kuwait and our independence. Our independence was in 1961, was in June, was in summer, 19th of June. We struggled right after the independence, and mainly the former president of Iraq was Abdul Karim Qasim at that time. He claimed that Kuwait is part of Iraq right after the troops left, the British troop left, and maybe we can't, why UK leave or left at that time, maybe. There is other, but maybe it's, it's out of our topic today, but let us focus about our foreign policy. Since then, we approach the Arab League. It was in 61. So we struggle even to be accepted in the Arab League for a month. Why? Because of the lobby of Iraq at that time. Then we failed even to be accepted in the United Nations. Another story. Why? Because of the veto, of the Russian veto. We've been rejected for 2 years. And then, we just started our independence. Really, we don't have professional diplomats at that time. We need to have two tracks now, whether to approach the Arab League or to go to the United Nations. Then we managed for the Arab League. Why? We show goodwill. We'll take out the British troops. Instead of that, we'll have some Arab soldiers instead of them. This is a different story. At least we manage, and we've been capable to overcome these things. There is some elements contributed to our foreign policy success in Kuwait, and mainly I believe democracy. Second thing is soft diplomacy. Let us focus for our democracy. Our democracy in Kuwait is very unique. Is really different than others within the area or the Middle East. Really, let me assure you that it's not a perfect, model of democracy in Kuwait, but at least I can assure you it is the best among the Middle East. Really, you cannot impose any model of democracy, what we have seen in the West, in the United States or in Great Britain or other places, and to impose such model in our area, in the GCC, whether within the GCC or Iraq or other places, you cannot impose. You have to understand the environment, the political environments, the cultural environment, the social environments, really so that's why they, the West try to impose their own model, really so that's why I believe you cannot have a proper democracy model within a day and night. Honestly speaking, you will fail, really so that's why I think our democracy is one of the good, successful example in the area, really So let us go for other areas, which is the Kuwaiti fund. This is one of the tools of our soft diplomacy. I believe, in the same year of our Independence Day, which is 1961, can you imagine that Kuwait create a new mechanism to participate its wealth with others? 1961, exactly like, why? Just to prove that we can participate our wealth with others, with those who's in need, honestly speaking. In Kuwait, it is in our DNA to really to engage in charity programs or whatsoever. My grandfather was a diver, really so they were struggling really my mom, she was really not highly educated, really. Barely she managed when she was really old to pass the high school, really So let us go for Kuwaiti Fund. What is the role of Kuwaiti Fund? Kuwaiti Fund role is to participate and to give some soft loans. And he engaged in, let me say, about 105 countries, which is not only Arab countries. Education, hospitals, infrastructures, electricity projects, whatsoever they engaged. And for me as an ambassador, I was accredited to Australia, for example. I was in Canberra accredited to the Pacific. Once I met the Prime Minister of the Solomon Island. I've seen the airport was not a good airport. They don't have the proper infrastructure. So I raised this issue, for the Prime Minister. And I told him, Excellency, why don't you approach Kuwaiti Fund? We can participate, we can engage. And he replied to me, Ambassador, are you criticizing those two projects? Those two projects were constructed by Kuwait in '74. So then I took it and I replied to him, it is like a compliment for Kuwait, where we don't have any presence, really, in Tokyo, we don't have any embassy. Even in Fiji, we don't have an embassy at that time. In New Zealand, we don't have in Australia. And we do have a good embassy as a Kuwaiti Fund Institute, really participating there. Kuwaiti Fund really locate around $280 million at that time, in '61. Nowadays, he's giving loans more than 35 billion. His assets is up to 7 billion now. He engaged and he gave the credit for our foreign policy. So I think this is one of the main tools for our soft diplomacy, really Let us go I don't want to focus on the Kuwaiti Fund role, but at least you can see the presence of the Kuwaiti Fund. It's similar to the GIZ here in Germany, really And we can go further, if you wish to speak about maybe, let us start by, close to our area. Our foreign policy always engage within circles. First circles is to the GCC. Second circle, we go to Arab and the Middle East, and then we go internationally, okay? GCC. GCC, one of the main ideas to create the GCC was the former Emir of Kuwait, was in '75. He was lobbying around, to convince the leaders of the GCC that there is such threat coming, really, Shahinshah regime at that time. And then, Khomeini, come into power, really, from '75 till it took 6 years. Everyone really were united at least to accept the idea of Kuwait. And then we started. Yes, there is some failures and there is some achievements of the GCC itself. The main obstacles, I believe personally, really for the GCC to test the ability and the credibility of the GCC, mainly I believe when it's not the first war of the Iraqi-Iranian war, no. I believe it's the Iraqi invasion. Really when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, for me personally, I cannot expect myself to be a prisoner of war, really as an Arab, really nationals, and to be entering Iraq without my passport and to be jailed as a prisoner of war, really, at that time. This is one. So the Iraqi invasion was really difficult, to prove where is our identity, really, for Kuwait, whether we belong to the Arab or, at least, we've been invaded. The help was our neighboring countries, really, at least we were happy, Saudi Arabia, at least the big brother of Kuwait, was taking the big role of endorsing Kuwait efforts to be liberated, really, and the rest of the GCC. So this is the first test, I believe. The second test of the GCC was, I believe, in 2017, where 4 countries announcing boycott for Arab countries announced to boycotting Qatar. So this was really the former Emir of Kuwait pay special attention for that. And he went to Washington, D.C. He met, Trump at that time, and he announced from there that Kuwait succeed to avoid any military action from, those 4 countries against Qatar. And this was really, at least, I believe, or we believe that, yes, he succeeded to avoid any military action. It means that there is a will at that time, maybe, in a way or another, maybe it might be a military action against them. Then, the mediation of Kuwait continued, really, through the former Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah, who's been as the dean of the foreign ministers for 40 years. So he knows by book, really, how to deal with such portfolio of the foreign policy. Then, at least, I think we passed this. Nowadays, we are happy, really, to pass the difficult, really, circumstances, really, at that time. We believe the main or the front line for Kuwait and for the region is the GCC. Really, there is some test we've been passing through, but maybe I'll leave this, for your question or whatsoever you have in mind. Maybe we can tackle other issues, I'll give you, I throw those ideas to you, really, at least maybe you will come up with ideas and to understand, what is the challenges of Kuwait? What is the main ideas? Kuwait is a small country with a small population, really, but they are different. Not because I'm Kuwaiti, we are different. I believe the role of democracy, really, in Kuwait recently, the influence of the parliament is really very high. They changed the prime minister, who's really you will tell me, is he from the royal family? Yes, he's from the royal family, but the pressure of the parliament, really, so the parameter of Kuwait is the parliament and the democracy, really, but you cannot insist or impose such model of democracy to be valid in Kuwait. Yes, it is not a complete, exercise, but I believe it is perfect exercise, really, in Kuwait in a way or another. Let us go for other areas of maybe, if you wish, about maybe Ukraine, if we can talk, or energy, or whatsoever you have in mind, maybe. Let us start by Ukraine, for example. Ukraine. Kuwait is a small country. And when the war started in last February, I quite remember that the resolutions of the Security Council, nor of the GA as well, a lot of people and a lot of countries hesitating to join and to endorse those resolutions. Why? Because of their direct interest to Moscow. For us, it was a matter of principle. I can assure you we were number one in endorsing this we do have a direct interest with Moscow, with Putin himself, and we do have the KIA office, the Kuwait Investment Authority, like, our investment is really very big, really, like, in Russia. But it was a matter of principle. So that's why we said firmly, and we convinced, and we managed to convince our brothers and friends, whether from the GCC and others, to join on board the resolutions itself. So, for Kuwait is, the principle of neutrality, really, like, or the positive neutrality, really, like, in Kuwait, or impartiality, maybe in a way or another, it was really positive at such certain area. We say no sometimes at the right time, when we indicate, like, the same things with Qatar for the crisis itself, whether the crisis with, against Saudi Arabia at that time. But we say that we cannot, as a principle for Kuwait, we cannot leave any countries invaded others. And it led the same things for Ukraine. For Ukraine, it's, for us, it was, as a principle. So you can see the differences at the first phase of the resolutions, and the second phase of the resolutions, really, like, both of them. Then we managed to, change or convince some other countries at least to join, really, like, Then we came up with the energy, crisis. For me, like, I believe, this is my personal point of view, is the crisis will be for quite a long time, maybe for the coming 3-4 years. It will not be solved. What I believe, always, I believe in dialogue, direct dialogue with states. Always have, windows for dialogues. You cannot consider Russia as a banana republic. Russia is still really, they are very powerful, and you cannot cluster Russia into Putin. Maybe Putin, the president, will die tomorrow. Are you willing to resume your cooperation with them? Are you going to accept the gas from Russia again? If they gave you, like, if they reduce the prices of gas, are you going to, like, There is some questions, really, like, theoretical questions sometimes I came up. If the former Chancellor, Angela Merkel, for example, was in power, are you expecting, like, I ask you, really, like, to see the same policy or the same foreign policy of Germany? What do you think? I believe it's different, really, like, So that's why I believe it's not about gas only. I can maybe tackle the visit of the Chancellor to our region, for example. He clustered limited his visit to 3 of the GCC countries, and mainly with those countries who they claim that they do have some violations for human rights violations, and then they addressed the issue of gas directly, and they went to Saudi Arabia, they went to Qatar and UAE. Okay. Then the ideas is different. So that's why I believe the question is, why criticizing Saudi Arabia and singling out Saudi Arabia only for the oil prices? Okay, and this led us to speak about OPEC and OPEC Plus. For example, OPEC Plus established recently, maybe in 2016, as I believe, where 3 countries members in that organization. OPEC, for example, established in 1960. Kuwait, one of the founder members. Before the independence, you can see, like, even our influence at that time in 1960. Founder members is 5. Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, if I'm not mistaken, Venezuela. Okay? This is the founding member of the OPEC. The prices of the oil, I think OPEC is, technical organization. Depends on the supply and demand policy, really, no need to politicize the organization itself. Gas prices going high. I'll tell you a live example as well. This residence, for example. Last year, how much we pay? Shams knows about this. Maybe around 100,000 euro only for the electricity and gas here. Okay, in the this year, we received last month a letter from the company. They asked us to terminate the contract from coming December. We negotiate with them. They told us we'll give you an offer now, a new offer, and they claim for 2 years contract. I told them maybe the coming year, their prices might be reduced. Are you going to reduce? I told them no. Okay, so how come I can endorse such contract for 2 years? So I told them, what is the prices for this year? So they told me 5 times. Actually, it's 5 times more, 5.3 more. Can you imagine, last year you were paying 100,000 euro, and this, 500,000. This is So then, President Macron, for example, he announced himself that, United States and others really sending their gas with, triple and 4th time more prices, really, and nobody speaks about, those things really, why you are singling out we can legalize the prices going up for the for the oil, for the gases, but not for the oil. Okay, so the question is, it's really a technical things. So that's why I'm trying to see other things. Within our foreign policy, I believe we have to indicate about the Palestinian peace process. I cannot neglect this in shaping our foreign policy. Palestine, I believe, is the main and the key role to solve the crisis in our area. Why? Because it's like a tree. Everyone want to climb and to go and to have the good fruit from there or whatsoever, really, Iran is really trying to create, a state inside the states through Hezbollah and others, really, and this led for other things. Maybe we can speak about the Arab Spring or whatsoever, maybe later if you wish. But at least maybe let us focus on Iran, for example, which is our direct neighbor. Iran, if we speak about the West, they focus and they cluster their interest only within the GCPOA. This is the only priority for them. Okay, fair enough. But at least you have to consult and to cooperate within the, our countries. We are a direct, really, we have to engage in the negotiations in Vienna. You cannot, pass, through this, really, When we thought, no, you are putting more gas on the fire, let us try for this. Think about the GCPOA. GCPOA, they started the agreements in 2015. It will end by 10 years, which is in maybe 2-3 years. What is next? Okay, this is the only engagement. Iran is trying to bargain and to waste the time till they join maybe the nuclear club, or they will have a bump maybe soon. Really, are we waiting for them? Let us see the issue of the drones in Ukraine, for example. We haven't seen a direct message from Europe, for example. to condemn these things. The double standard sometimes. This is what we feel. This is why really you cannot talk here in Germany, for example, about Mahsa Amini, for example, okay? And then you allow them to protest up to 80,000 last weekend, okay? And for the Palestinian people, you cannot allow them to protest. Why? Why is this really? We believe it's a double standard, really, even nevertheless, the situation in Afghanistan, for example. Okay, there is some mistakes, really, in Iraq, in Egypt, for example, Tunisia, Tripoli, other places, Yemen. It's not a seasonal interest you can interfere. For example, for Yemen, it was within the foreign policy priorities of Germany. For the rest of now 2 or 3 years, no new initiative for Yemen. Yeah, maybe you will tell me yes, maybe because of Ukraine. You are right, but I reply again, you cannot cluster your interest within one topic. With the security is really important, but Ukraine is today. Tomorrow you will lose friends. Like Putin asking now Saudi Arabia and others to shape a new coalition within the BRICS organizations, other organizations, really and usually, really I'm as an ambassador, usually we bargain and searching for a new market, always. For me, I've been posted as an ambassador to Vietnam, ambassador to Australia, ambassador to Albania as well, and this is my 4th ambassadorial post. Always we keep searching for a new market, new promising market, and mainly after the food crisis of 2008. And we succeed in this. We succeed founding new areas for that. Now I believe within our foreign policy, we engage for the hydrogen projects, the green hydrogen, maybe one of the interest. Maybe we'll say, the oil is going to not to be the more reliable, maybe energy resources in the coming years. But yes, maybe we can it will lead for other industry, for sure, really, and that's why we keep focusing on this. I believe I will stop not talking too much with this, but I will leave this to you. If you do have questions, I can answer. Maybe other areas, I do have other, things maybe to raise, but let us start for a minute, take some questions or clarifications or what do you have in mind, and then we can assume, talking about the rest. Thank you.
Your Excellency. So we now have a special opportunity to ask questions, make comments, and join the ambassadorial discussion. So as always, if you could raise your hand, briefly introduce yourself, and I think if you could stand to make sure that we can hear properly, that would be great.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for the insight. I have a question. I read an article not too long ago about how Kuwait had planned to phase out some of the expats or basically reduce the amount of expats that it has in the country. Because, like you said, it is a small country with a small population. And I think it was a 5-year plan or something to reduce expats over time. So I was wondering how decisions like that are taken within the country do influence the foreign policy that's executed outside.
In which area you mean?
It was a plan to reduce the number of expats in the country.
Which expats?
Expats coming from around the world who are currently working in...
the labor issue.
Yes.
Okay, got you. Okay. This is a very important, really issues. We do have in Kuwait 5 million. This depends on the role of the governments and the needs of the market itself. Whether the market can absorb those 5 million or not. We are not expelling those laborers out, but they come as a contractual labor with a such certain limit for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, whatsoever, really, But when they end their, the period of their stay, they will leave the country. Okay, so I believe it depends on their contract. But the issue of granting them, a nationality of Kuwait, this is different things, But they came with a contract, and this is normal everywhere, really. It's here in Germany, I'm allowed to stay. I've been here, this is my 4 years here. I cannot ask for a nationality, really. I still have to get a visa. I have to whatsoever process they have, but for a labor issue, in Kuwait we don't have any obstacles on this. Maybe if you allow me to touch the issue of the soft diplomacy as well. I have seen this been raising for Qatar. Qatar, as a small country, they pay special efforts, really, to host the international cup. I don't know why it's faced a very strong campaign for them, and mainly for the labor issue. I'm a big fan of soccer. I like soccer. I enjoy soccer. I still play soccer. Since the first tournament of the international cup, World Cup, it was in 1930. If I'm not mistaken, it was in Uruguay. Okay, and I believe Uruguay won that tournament. Maybe it was for the first or the second, maybe more or less. Yeah. And then, after this, till the last tournament of Russia was in 2018. Nobody criticized anyone about labor issues or whatsoever. And then when it comes 2022 for a small country like Qatar, we are happy at least to celebrate. Sport, it's about the spirit, of passion, about cooperation, about collaboration with others, about social, cultural events or whatsoever. Really, So we've been imposing and criticizing Qatar for things that they host. Labor issues in Qatar, yes, it is important, but there is some rules. There is maybe some mistakes, but it's a small mistake. It's not much, really, to speak. But when I've seen the coach of Germany criticizing that, and he announcing that if they won the cup, the coming cup, they will not celebrate in Qatar. They will celebrate back in Germany. This is ridiculous, really, it's not about sport. So sometimes I think they go out of the box to raise issues, for personal interest, really. Thank you. I hope that I replied to your question.
I guess so, but I was just wondering how it affects, foreign policy, or your stance basically towards foreign policy. I was just giving that as an example, but I was asking about the decisions that are taken inside the country and how they can kind of be translated into foreign policy.
So how the domestic policy influences the foreign policy?
Yeah.
It's both connected. When you take any internal measures in Kuwait, for example, I spoke about the role of the Kuwaiti fund. Do you think that when you allocate billions to build schools and roads, and hospitals, the people of Kuwait will be asking the same, to have better roads, better conditions, better things, really, But honestly speaking, our policy is really balanced. For sure, it's connected together. Mainly, we haven't regret. For example, I spoke about the invasion of Iraq. Okay, we've been invaded. We've been having checkpoints from Palestinian people during the invasion. Okay, we haven't really mixed up those topics, not to contribute to and to continue our contributions for the people of Palestine. We still really committed to the same issues. Really in a way or another, definitely it's connected, and there is some influence for sure, as all countries, I believe. Yeah.
Additional questions, comments?
Thank you, Your Excellency. You mentioned the positive role of Kuwait's diplomacy in the region, but on the other hand, we have countries like Saudi Arabia, and you also mentioned that the interference in Qatar, the interference in Yemen, the interference in countries like Lebanon as well. It's part of the GCC policy, but how do you stay neutral, and a member country of the GCC is taking a different approach to foreign policy?
You will be a neutral for a certain limit. When you see a country interfering in 4 Arab countries and creating a state inside the state, you cannot keep silent. And even with the international law, if you see a fire coming from border to border, you cannot oh, it's not my border, I cannot interfere. I have to put this fire off, really So that's why I believe Kuwait is participating, and we cannot leave a country dominating in Yemen, really So that's why we play a great role in Yemen. We host the negotiation of Yemen for 105 days in Kuwait. And mainly, we were about to finalize an agreement. Last minute, really they've been receiving a call not to sign the agreements, and this is it.
From who the call came?
From other third parties, really the influence of other countries, and from whom the Houthis are connected, really yeah.
So if I might follow, how do you see the role of the Saudi diplomacy, and how do you compare it to Kuwait's diplomacy? Do you see it as positive as Kuwait's diplomacy or foreign policy?
Saudis is leading, and they are leading the role of the GCC, really and they are paying attention to the security. During the Iraqi invasion, mainly without the coalition led by United States and Saudi Arabia, maybe I will not be sitting here today, honestly speaking. So Saudi Arabia is our big brother, really and they are playing a positive role in the region, really yeah.
Hello, I'm a student here in ICD, and so oil accounts for half Kuwait's GDP, and so that's pretty big. And given that we're approaching a new era, is Kuwait investing in any renewable energy there out inside the country or outside, like Africa, for example? Anywhere, just.
In Africa, we are really connected, direct through Kuwaiti Fund. Depends on the priorities of every single countries. Yes, renewable energy is one of the main priorities for our policy in Kuwait. Recently, we opened up a new factory of $10 billion, which is for renewable energy. We are in the process really to cooperate with Germany as well.
Where?
In Kuwait.
Oh,
in Kuwait. And mainly for others, it depends on the request, if it's within the priorities of the, African countries or others, yeah, for sure, yeah. We can open a new, like in Australia, in Perth, the Western Australia. We do have a project with Chevron. The project is up to 40 billion. Our share is around 10 billion out of that project. One of the biggest, projects we have abroad is in Australia as well. Yeah.
In the back.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
صباح الخير يا شيخ.
صباح الخير.
I am Lukman Mohammed Awad from Nigeria.
أهلا وسهلا.
First and foremost, I want to commend the efforts of the Kuwait government, especially for their assistance to Nigeria, especially during the period of some natural disaster in the northern part of Nigeria. I'm also thanking the government, especially during the month of Ramadan and other Eid that the government used to assist us in the northern part of Nigeria. Although I'm not from the northern part of Nigeria, I'm from the southwest of Nigeria. But notwithstanding, we still have to acknowledge that you are doing something there. However, Nigeria being a petroleum exporting country and being a member of OPEC, I still believe that your country, through GCC, can still impact a lot on our country and Africa at large. We are, yes, in economic ties with you, but most of the economic ties with Nigeria are majorly with the Western world, Russia also, and China as well. I want to feel the impacts of the GCC country, especially Kuwait, in our midst. Just like my brother was just saying something now, we want to see a very, examples of how you assist our nation, our continent, and if you give a special consideration to our own expertise as well, the expatriates that come from Africa, and in what areas are they welcome. Thank you very much.
For me, thank you for your compliments about Kuwait, really, I think it's part of our duty to engage in, and to support our brothers and friends, really, abroad. For me, as an ambassador of Kuwait, I was in Albania, for example, in Tirana. Our focus is, and this comes even personally for me, really, I will start with education. When you start from the bottom, till other areas. So what I believe is the school is to have the proper education. It means that you will minimize, you will not get rid of the corruptions, but for sure you will reduce, really, when you do have a democracy and when you do have a corruption, they will, at least, and to have the right education, you have the right people to defend your strategy or your plans or your priorities in Nigeria and others, even in Kuwait, really, I'm speaking even about ourselves, really, So to start, I believe, within the priorities, I believe, and this led to indicate that within our priority in Kuwait, we do have a program of full scholarship for our, students, Kuwaiti students abroad. When I was in Australia, we do have an average of 3,500 students, in Australia. Those are really, students are good ambassadors, really, to promote for Australia. In the United States, we do have around 15,000 students, full scholarship from my government, really, And Great Britain, around, I believe, from 9 to 10,000 students, full scholarship. Here in Germany, we don't have. Okay, we do have maybe postgraduate. We don't have much, honestly speaking. Why? Maybe because of the, it's free, really, it's not within their interest, maybe we don't have, honestly speaking. But the point is to focus on education and to start, for me, really, But back to the question is, for Nigeria or others really like areas, Nigeria is a very wealthy country, by the way. You know, it's and you know, within our interest to support you know, our friends in the region. But it comes within your priorities in Nigeria. It comes from the governments. And by the way, Kuwaiti Fund is participating and contributing in only government to government commitment, really like, you know, although we are trying to link people to people, but it comes through government's commitment, really like, you know, yeah. Thank you.
Hello, Your Excellency. Renato from Brazil. I would like to go back a little bit to history about the Iraqi invasion, projecting it to more to today. So, as you said, I mean, it had 30 years have passed since 31 years, right, since the Gulf War.
Yeah.
And how is the Kuwaiti relationship now with Iraqi after these 3 decades? Taking into consideration what you said, that you, Iraq and Kuwait, they have this similar origins. Quoting Samuel Huntington, you have the same kin, right? What he focus a lot. So how are things? Because maybe I see a little bit of resentment of what happened, but 30 years have passed. How are the relationships now with Iraqi 30 years after that crucial event?
For sure, it's better than before. And you may say why and how. You know, the former Emir of Kuwait was totally convinced that we have to close this chapter forever, and we have to look for the future. And we believe we cannot live in peace while there is some turbulences or some troubles with, you know, our neighbor. In Kuwait, we host a conference, pledging conference for Iraq in 2013, and the pledges was up to 3 billion. Kuwait pledged 2 billion for Iraq. We put our investments into Iraq. Still, we have this amount in the bank and we haven't put it there. Why? There is no proper conditions of you know, stability in Iraq, and they haven't asked to develop you know, the projects in Iraq. Yes, we do have an excellent, and I believe, you know, we do have close connections with the 3 presidencies of Iraq, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Presidents, and the Prime Minister, honestly speaking. But unfortunately, the fractions and the differences they have nowadays, really it's difficult situations. But we do have a very strong ties of friendship with Iraq. And maybe it's the best among all Arab countries, really like, yeah. Thank you.
I think you were next, and then we'll go here.
Thank you. Good morning, thanks for the presentation. I'm Lorenzo, I'm an ICT student from Italy. So, as you said, Kuwait is a, would say, very recent country since it obtained its independence in 1961. I would say that we cannot compare the historical and cultural heritage of Kuwait to the ones of European countries like Europe, like Italy or France, or to other Middle Eastern countries like, I would say, Lebanon or Iran, or North African countries like Egypt. So in this sense, my perception that, of course, might be wrong, is that since for Kuwait it's more difficult to invest in its past in order to share a positive image and identity of the country to the rest of the world as part of its cultural diplomacy policies. It's nowadays investing in the future, in technological and urban development, in order to spread an image of, I would say, modernity and avant-garde to the country, to the rest of the world. So I would say that this, in my opinion, this contrasts a lot with the European cultural policy, which tries to spread the opposite side, an image and an identity through its past, historical heritage, historical sites, and I will use the same example of Italy or France. And so my question is it this perception true? And if it is, if yes, can you share a few examples of cultural projects and policies in Kuwait nowadays?
You know, I cannot compare Kuwait with, you know, Italy and others, really, like, you know. But I compare a state as a state itself. Yeah, we do have a great potential in Kuwait to promote our cultural efforts and programs abroad. But within our limited, really, like, you know, our independence is just like, you know, from 61. So you indicated rightly, like, you know, yeah, but we are willing to engage more, but we don't have the same history of those countries that you are referring, really, like, you know, but we are open to share our culture, our experiences as a small country, really, like, you know, with others, and we are happy to engage with and this is part of our policy. And maybe you remind me about the role of mediation of Kuwait. Can you imagine that Kuwait, within such limited history, we do have a mediation between Pakistan and Bangladesh, between Saudi Arabia and Egypt, between really Qatar and Yemen, south and really, like, you know, even between Yemeni themselves. Others, really, like, you know, and even in Latin America we do have a great role, really, like, you know, of mediation. Yes, culture of peace, culture of tolerance, really, like, you know, and human rights, really, like, you know, to support those values, really, like, you know, we are willing to engage more, really, like, you know. After the independence of 61, we applied for 32 organizations, international organizations. At that time was the GATT. It was not the WTO and others, really, like. And we succeed to have as a founding members of those organizations. So yes, we do have the experience, maybe ahead of others, really, like, you know, in internationally, yeah. But we are willing to engage more, yes, and this is what about, you know, cultural diplomacy. Maybe part of the exercise we can share our experience and to learn from our you know, experiences from each other, really, like, yeah, of course.
Your Excellency, before I go to the next question, just as a follow-up question, you were mentioning the power of sports before and soccer.
Yeah.
Have there been any examples of cultural diplomacy within the GCC region?
Yes.
Whether it's sports or arts or other?
We do have a very strong tournament for us, more important than you know, in Latins, or more important than the international cup for us, for the GCC, really, like, you know, we do have a tournament in since 71 it was, ولا بطولة كأس الخليج. Yeah. 70, or 70, yeah. Iraq is participating, and they do have a very strong team in Iraq, really, like, you know, and they at least we are ahead of others, I think, numbers of qualifying or winning this tournament. I believe Kuwait is up to maybe 9 times, 10 times out of that tournament, and this really led to us as a soft diplomacy in soccer to accept Iraq in engaging in GCC institute itself in such certain areas, in social, cultural, and economic, really, like, you know, sections, in order, like, you know, to have a full memberships in the future, really, yeah. But yes, soccer is not only soccer, really, like all kind of sports. You know, yeah.
So cooperation on the soccer field can help for negotiations and the...
Of course. Yes. Sometimes if you do have, like, you know, some differences or some problems between, like, Iraq and Kuwait, sometimes, you know, through those games you may solve issues, political issues, yeah. And it happens many times in Kuwait, yeah.
Please, you're ready.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned Shah and Khomeini.
Yeah.
I want to know if diplomatic relationships between Iran and Kuwait have
changed after the revolution of 1979? Or
We've been committed to have a relationship, regardless who's really controlling the regime. Really, we do have a very strong relationship with Shah, and even with the new regime in Iran, we do have it's our direct neighbor for sure. And maybe we are one of the main, not the only. I will not say the only, one of the main and important channel for dialogue with Iran. Really, and we have to have this channel of dialogue with Iran. It's really very important. Really, to keep the dialogue with Iran. Still, always we emphasize to have the proper dialogue with Iran. Really, and to ask, everyone, every state not to interfere in, in internal issues of other countries. Really.
Thank you, Excellency, for the very informative presentation about Kuwait. So my question for you is, what's your view on the rapprochement between the Russian Federation and Saudi Arabia in the view of situation with Iran and in Yemen?
Well, I cannot speak on behalf of Saudi Arabia or Russia about their, but they have their own rights, to defend their interest. Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
Logo from Nigeria. We came that at least we've gotten where you spoke about this interest of these big blobs. And my brother spoke about our nation. And I said, I'm just thinking, does it mean that the West and the GCC does not have any interest in terms of Africa, because considering the crisis within the Sahel region, in our own context, Boko Haram and other insurgencies, I have not seen other countries coming in to say, well, let's mediate on this and probably bring some of these crises to an amicable settlement. But of course, when you looked at other blocs, as you said, is it that they have a global interest with the African context of it, or it seems the West and of course the GCC are not much, because it goes beyond just the issue of assisting the country, as you said, beyond just giving assistance, but what role to bring about some of those, curtailing some of those crises or challenges that are going within that region, Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and the rest, which mostly carry sometimes religious configuration, but of course interest of groups are there. And of course, they come down to the southern part, which is where the oil is being produced, and of course, is one of the greater oil producing countries in the world. But yet, it's as if majority of the West and the other part of the world seems not to care what all the happenings within that region. What would have been responsible for that?
Well, this is a very difficult question and very important question at the same time. Kuwait is a small country. We are not a superpower. Those issues really within our humble tools or whatsoever, even in Chad, Nigeria and other places, we've been mediating and playing a great role within the former minister of Kuwait, who became later as a president of Kuwait. But I believe those issues, the proper place to discuss and to raise is within the United Nations, really, and sometimes the African themselves, the African Union themselves, they have to play, and this is what I believe, really, always try to depend on yourself internally. This would be my advice. Don't let others to interfere in your issues. African people, they know themselves what is the main priorities, how to solve their own problems together. If you share your differences with others, those peoples watching from the fence there, they will put more gas into for their interest, honestly speaking. So I believe you have to come up together, sit together, have the proper dialogue together, and then discuss from there. You cannot speak about the water issues in Ethiopia without consulting and cooperating with Egypt, for example, or Sudan or others, really, like, you know. It is an African issue. Sometimes it's an internal issue. It's not about investments, it's not about how to support Africa. It is a political issue. And it's a complex issue, really, like, you know, it's full of differences. It's not an easy task, like, you know, but my point is to focus, and it has to be within the African Union. Thank you.
Hello. As an Arabian country, I wanted to know, maybe compare you with UAE or Qatar, and they have some kind of policies that they do many advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
For example, for UAE, you can see that about Dubai.
Yeah.
And why I think that Kuwait is not doing this? What's the perspective of the Kuwaiti people?
If you do have a good franchise, no need to market. Okay. So this is what I believe, really, like, you know. You can, like, Google about Kuwait and see the role of Kuwait, mainly, like, you know, but we don't, you know, speak about you know, our role or whatsoever, really, like, you know. Yes, maybe they are doing good in investments and marketing or whatsoever, really, like, you know. But I think we are doing good as well, really, like, you know, and maybe I can extend an invitation for all of you to, and I'll be with you in Kuwait. You will be happy to visit Kuwait and to see, like, you know, how it's progressing, really, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, as an advertisement, not to say that it's I say that they come for us, so I asked this question.
Yeah, I know, but, you know, it was a joke.
Your Excellency, actually, now I see a few hands, but I'm just looking at the watch. I think we should maybe conclude the formal part of this, because
Yes.
the ambassador has been so kind to also prepare our lunch for us, which we're very grateful for.
Okay.
And we also have a full program at the ICD. We have to be back at 2:15, 2:30 at the latest. So I want to make sure we can do everything. So I'd suggest let's not end the dialogue, but let's change the dialogue from the formal setting, maybe to the informal setting. I'm sure the ambassador would be very happy if we were to approach him and ask anything you'd like. And once again, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you, to Kuwait, for hosting us today, and also for the very thought-provoking discussion that you just inspired with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mark, and I hope that we'll keep in touch, really, like, you know, and to organize another, really, like, you know, session whenever, like, you know, you do have time. Thank you for that.